Hey there, everyone. Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with this week's market overview and stocks to watch. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got coming up from the economic calendar for the week ahead. We've got quite a bit actually. Case Shiller home pricing, consumer confidence index, new home sales. Got a few. We got Jerome Powell speaking. We got a few Fed speakers next week on Tuesday. We've got durable goods orders, core capex, weekly jobless claims, GDP revision, pending home sales, personal income, consumer spending, core inflation, Chicago PMI, and consumer sentiment. So we've got quite a bit going on next week in terms of economic data that could impact the markets. I think now that we've got the Fed behind us and it seems like he delivered, at least that's what the street wanted to see. A lot of focus is going to be on China and, of course, Iran with what's going on there. I think there's going to be a lot of focus there. And then we've got some individual names that are reporting earnings this week that could be impactful for their industries. So, a lot going on in terms of economic data, geopolitical stuff that could impact the markets. Friday was kind of an interesting day in the markets, right? We did have a nice little pop, but then we tested new all-time highs in the SPY, and then we pulled back a little bit. So I think next week sets up technically to be a pretty interesting week. Let's take a look at some of the individual sectors. Hold on a second here. There we go. We'll take a look at some of the sectors, and then we'll take a look at some of the stocks that'll be kind of focusing on, at least from an earnings perspective. I have a whole list of stocks for the pro members to keep an eye on last week, or keep an eye on for this week. Um, and we'll get to that. Actually, we're not going to get to that. That's for the pro members, but do have some stocks to watch for that have earnings next week. So, all right. So overall, IBB reclaimed the 200-day. I think that was pretty impressive last week. See if maybe we can continue to flag out here right at the 200-day. I think there's some good-looking setups within the biotech space, and it's worth keeping an eye on that sector. IWM also reclaiming the 50 and 200-day. Actually, it looks like we closed just below the 50-day on Friday. So, I'm still concerned that we might be putting in a lower high here in the IWM. It was nice to see it reclaim the moving average, but I am still concerned about the IWM and small caps. IYT bumping up against the 50-day, right there at the 200-day. And that, the transportation space could be impacted this week. You got FedEx reporting Tuesday after the close, and I just saw some news out that China is, probably going to be looking at putting some kind of penalty on FedEx here. Not expected to be a good earnings report. If that one pulls back, that could be tough on the transportation space. So keep an eye on that. JNUG, gold clearly breaking out, right? So JNUG and Nugget, I mean, now it's getting kind of a little parabolic here. I mean, we're gapping higher. I don't get the gold bug idea. This is considered to be a safety type trade. I with the stuff that's going on in Iran, fear of going to war. I can understand the pop in gold, but I'm wondering if this is getting close to an area where maybe we see a pullback, right? So we do have a gold miner that is reporting this week. That could be interesting. And if that winds up, if they miss or to give a weak guide, then we could see some weakness or pullback in gold and the gold miners. JDST would be something to consider if you do see a rollover in gold. That would be considered, it's a short biased levered ETF. You got to be careful with those, but definitely worth keeping an eye on. Uh, you know, NASDAQ, we are approaching an area of potential price resistance, potential double top. Um, we'll see how it plays out next week, but it's had some of the big cap, big tech boys that had a nice little run. We'll see if maybe we come up into some resistance here. SMH continues to struggle a little bit, did break this trend line, but again, I'm a little concerned that maybe we're putting in a lower high. So we'll have to see how this plays out. But we have some semiconductor names reporting this week that could impact the space. S&P 500. So we did briefly break above the all-time high, and it looks like maybe we're starting to struggle a little bit here. Could this be a double top? Maybe, I don't know. We'll have to see, or a triple top, I guess, because we had a double top there. But I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. But S&P 500 is near an area where we could find some resistance. See if we pull back. Of course, if the markets do roll over, TVIX, TZA, right, looking for volatility to come into the markets, and then TZA, if the IWM can't manage to move higher, then you could potentially see a pop in TZA. So worth keeping an eye on that if we see weakness in the IWM. Home builders. So we have two home builders reporting. We've got Lennar and KB Home. Neither one of their charts look that great. We'll be talking about that in a minute. But the home builders are flagging out a little bit here, but we could have an area of potential price resistance. We'll see what happens after those two home builders report. May see a pullback there. Energy, so we did get a bit of a lift in energy after the stuff going on with Iran. And it could be a sector, I've been pretty disappointed just for a short-term trade. I'm not convinced long-term hold positions are viable at this point in the energy and oil exploration space. They just haven't had the kind of move that you would expect with the merger and acquisition activity that we saw, the spike to nearly $70 a barrel. Just didn't get that kind of follow through, but that doesn't mean we can't get a short-term trade as XLE maybe comes back up and tests this longer-term trend line. So keep an eye on some of the energy names out there. XLF got still meandering around. I think there are some decent looking names. This is considered to be a value space right now. I think there's some decent looking names in XLF, but big thick stocks, typically longer term hold type plays. We'll see what the space does. It is holding at the 50-day moving average. Not one of my favorite spaces to trade, but worth keeping an eye on. Industrials, so look, if there's good news on the China front from the G20, then maybe we see industrials continue to move higher. If we see some bad news out of the G20, we could see some weakness in that space, and I would be a little bit cautious there. XLP, we have, let's see, who do we have? General Mills is reporting this week. This space has been consolidating, also considered to be kind of the safety trade, but valuations are pretty rich within that space. But General Mills, we'll see how that impacts the sector. It did take out an area of price resistance. Let's see what happens next week, and maybe we pull back to the 50-day. XLU, right? Another safety type trade. Utilities consolidating. Potential little short-term double top there. XLV Healthcare. Actually took out a little area of price resistance. Could be looking to consolidate here. I actually like the healthcare space. I think that's one that you keep an eye on. Potential trading opportunities as well as maybe swing or long-term hold considerations. Consumer discretionary, right? Potential double top here. Had a nice little run. Maybe we just consolidate. Did reclaim the 50-day moving average. Let's see if that can continue to hold up. XOP double bottom. Did I already talked about energy, but some of these names have gotten really beaten up. Tensions continue to rise in Iran or through the Strait. We could see some continued strength in that space, but I still think that maybe we're in a long-term downtrend. I don't know. XRT retail, not crazy about retail, but trying to come up and test that 50-day. Just not crazy about that space. But and then the other one that I didn't put on here, but I think is worth mentioning is not ZAR. Hold on a second here. XAR, aerospace and defense, and that has been one of the leading sectors out there. Let's take a look at it real quick. XAR at an area of potential resistance here. We got it looks like it actually just made some new all-time highs. It did. It's still a really good looking space. I mean, it might need time to consolidate, but aerospace and defense has definitely been one of the leading sectors out there, and there's still some names that I really like within that space that I think are worth keeping an eye on. And that's it for the overall sectors. I think next week could be a very interesting week. Let's see how it plays out. And as far as earnings, so there are some stocks that I have on my list of stocks to watch, and then there are others that I haven't put on there, but I think are worth mentioning here. The solar names, Renesola and Jinko. Solar names have recently had a pretty nice pop. There's two solar names reporting. I think those are worth keeping an eye on to see if they report decent numbers, see how they impact the sector. And let's see, what was the other one here? Accenture, I think, is another one to keep an eye on. And Actuant, I think that actually might have made my list. But Accenture is another one to keep an eye on, just in terms of how it may impact the space. All right, let's take a look at the actual list here of stocks to keep an eye on. So first one on deck here is this Nike. You've probably heard of that company. Retail play, right? So it's been in a trading within a channel actually for a while here. Between let's call it $81 and $89, $90, right? Did break down here, but managed to snap back pretty nicely. If Nike disappoints, that's going to put some pressure on the retail space or retail sector. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on. If it takes out, $90 with authority, this thing could be on a rocket ship to new highs. But it is a big, thick stock, so keep that in mind. 1.4 billion shares in the float, more of a swing or long-term hold consideration. And it'll be interesting to see how earnings impact the stock. I'm not really looking to trade it, but I do think it's worth keeping an eye on just to see how it impacts the sector. NG is the gold name that is reporting, and this thing has had a monster move heading into this earnings report. So, you got a candle that's completely out of the upper Bollinger Band. If these guys disappoint, you could see a pretty swift pullback in NG, right? So maybe pull back down into the 450 area, 450 $4 area. See if that acts as support, and if they have a decent a decent earnings report and a decent guide, it just may have priced it in already, and then look for an opportunity. If you like gold and if you like the gold miners, maybe you look for a pullback to an area of price support to go long, right? For a swing. If you think the gold trend is going to continue, maybe you look to jump in this one on a pullback to an area of potential price support. But I think it's worth keeping an eye on that one. GIS, if they report good numbers and good earnings and this thing gaps up, don't chase the gap, right? Maybe you look for it to pull back to where it gapped up from to get in on NG. General Mills, like I said, so has had a pretty nice run into its earnings. It's at an area of potential price resistance. If they disappoint, we could see a pullback here. Let me back this thing out to the weekly. So, if you look at it on a weekly time frame, longer term time frame, right, we are still in a downtrend. Actually, it looks like we're kind of trying to take that out a little bit. We're at a pretty good area of price resistance. So, $55, if it can take that out with conviction, maybe GS gets some follow through, or GIS gets some follow through. It's kind of a thicker stock, 500, almost half a billion shares in the float. So, worth keeping an eye on this GIS for a break over 55 with some conviction. SGH, so semiconductor, right? You can take a look at this one and see we are in a downtrend. And it's actually at an area of, it's testing the 50-day moving average. So these guys report Thursday after the close. Potentially this breaks over $20 holla. Maybe we get, test this trend line here, test the 100 EMA. That would put us somewhere around, let's see, where are we at? About 22, 25 or so. If these guys disappoint, there's a possibility it's coming back here to test this $17 area, $16.80, $17 area. And then if we lose that area as support, that could be problematic for SGH. So fairly small float in this one, only 22 million shares in the float. So worth keeping an eye on. If it gets some volume, they report a good number, give a good guide. This one could be a nice potential day trading opportunity, maybe even a short-term swing. If they disappoint, this one could pull back. So be careful out there. ATU, Actuant. So, this is one that also is in a bit of a downtrend. I mean, you could look at it like this and say, okay, we're in a bit of an uptrend, but we're also longer term, we're in a downtrend. So it's at an interesting spot, consolidating just below the 50-day and 200-day moving averages, just below the $23 holla. If these guys disappoint, we could see a pullback and retest in this 22 area, which seems to be trying to act as support. If that fails, then you're likely going to come back down, maybe do a double bottom test over here in the 19-20 range. BlackBerry reports. They report Wednesday before the open. BlackBerry, I tell you, they've actually reported some decent earnings, and the stock typically gets a little bit of a pop and then pulls back off of the earnings. It's in an interesting spot. It was flirting with the $9 holla. If they give good earnings report and a good guide, and the stock pulls back to 760 or maybe even back down to the 650 area, it could be an interesting spot to take it for some type of a bounce play. It's a thicker stock, more of a swing or long-term hold type play on BlackBerry, but I think it's worth keeping an eye on this one. Let me just see. Let me just see real quick here what the float is on BlackBerry. Actually, it's not that thick for BlackBerry. Oh, no, 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 no. Wrong one. Hold on. Hold on. Yeah, it is thick. 534 million shares in the float. So pretty thick stock. Not a big short interest, 3% short interest, not, 3.76% short interest. Not huge. Um, like I said, more of a swing or long-term hold type play. If it breaks below 770, 760, likely it's heading back down into that 6 and change range, and that could be an interesting spot to take it for a potential bounce area. FDX, FedEx, right? So below the 50-day moving average, not a great looking chart. A lot of people kind of expecting this to be a disappointing earnings call, and if it is, maybe this thing comes down and tests somewhere around the 230 area. See if that maybe acts as support. Hold on a second here. Oh, I screwed up. I had my chart all screwed up. Hold on a second. Now, this is even worse than I thought. All right, so we've broken this long-term trend line here, and actually it came up and tried to reclaim it. If these guys disappoint, this thing could wind up. Hold on a second. What is going on with my TC2000? Can't seem to move my chart here. Oh, I know why. Okay, just did a double bottom test on this one down to 143. Boy, I'm going to have to go back and look at my other charts here and make sure I didn't screw everything up. But FDX, definitely in a downtrend, not looking good. If this thing breaks below 143, that is definitely going to be problematic for FDX and potentially the sector. Let me go back to this BB real quick and make sure. Okay, yeah, we're in a good spot. We're fine. All right. CAMP. So communication equipment, stock, bear flag on the daily, flirting with $10 potential support. These guys report earnings on Thursday after the close. Now, this has only got 33.8 million shares in the float. If they report a good number, maybe this gets a nice little bounce. Could be a day trading opportunity there. But if this thing, if they disappoint, this 960, 950 area is a big spot. Break down below that. That could be pretty problematic for CAMP. That could be a short, potential short, right? If you break down below this 960 area. Definitely, I think, worth keeping an eye on and see how it also impacts the space, right? The communication equipment space. So, MU, semiconductor, at an interest that kind of looks like a bear flag below the 50-day. You just had a death cross. That, if these guys disappoint, that could be problematic for the semi space. And the last one is KBH. So, look, KBH kind of looks like we're slipping to the downside here. Maybe we come back down and test this 200-day moving average right around 23 bucks. Did just have a golden cross. And then Lennar also had the golden cross. But, both of these look like they're weakening ahead of their earnings report. So we'll see how these play out. But I think it's worth keeping an eye on them for the space, right? And then if these guys actually report good earnings and give a good guide and they go off to, break through price resistance to the upside, One to maybe look at as a sympathy play would be Beezer Homes. Right, so not a great looking chart here on Beezer Homes. But if these guys, if KBH and Lennar rip to the upside, you could see Beezer play a little catch up. So worth keeping an eye on that one. And that's it. That is the list of stocks to watch, at least for earnings next week. I'm getting ready to put out the video for the pro members on the stocks to watch for trading. And just to take a real quick look here, this is the list of stocks from last week for the pro members and their performance for the week. ZYXI led the list with a 26% move. REPR, little thin traded stock, actually up 23%. HRO up 19%. So some pretty nice movers. Also a couple of silver plays that had a nice little move last week, and I'm actually thinking that some of those could continue on into this week. So that's it. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please hit the little like button, forward it to friends, and if you like what I do, consider becoming a member over at Alpha Wolf Trading for $197 a year. That's it, $197 a year, but that price will be going up in August. So all right, that's it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you all next week. Good luck trading next week. Know your risk reward. Have a plan. Don't chase. See you later.